Okay.
You gotta watch so you don't trip, okay?
I'm not gonna trip. Go.
Just watch where you're going. Ooh. I'm glad it's not raining.
Nice.
I know. My shoes are muddy now. Oh, this is so muddy.
So when I was trying to prep for these tours this year, I decided I should actually have a definition of what a ghost was. And it's what you think it is. It's essentially just a
It can
spirit.
go through you.
Yeah, that's one thing. I mean, there's a lot of different styles and types of ghosts. I think is the tricky thing. But what they all have in common is that they are some sort of a spirit manifestation of something or someone who is dead, who is not yet passed on to a different plane. They're still hanging out on our side of reality for whatever various reason. What I also thought was pretty interesting about that, though, is the way that science and our understanding of science has sort of changed the way people think about ghosts. It used to be that if you saw something that you couldn't rationally explain, the rational explanation was that that was a ghost, right? Like, because at this time you actually believed in ghosts, it was like sort of obvious that that was just a ghost. That's what that was. And now we've reversed it. Like, we try very, 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 very hard to use the rational explanation, to use science, to use whatever we have to explain what that was, versus being like, oh, clearly it was a ghost. So I think that's kind of an interesting mind switch that we've gone through. And certainly in the 1830s and 40s, when the majority of these buildings had been first built before they were moved here, they were full of people who believe in ghosts, and so I guess it's rational to say they might be full of ghosts. What we're going to do is I'm going to tell you stories, sightings, experiences that have actually happened. They have happened to mostly people who work here, but occasionally they've also happened to visitors, and so I'll share those with you. I'll attribute them by name when I can. This is to say that we are not making any of it up. It is real. I don't know if I can say that it is true, right? Like, that's their truth. I can't verify it, but it happened to someone, and so I'll just share all of that. When I was also trying to dig into the 1800s, I was trying to find statistics as terms of like how many people believed in ghosts at that time period, and I couldn't find any because I guess they didn't do any national polls at that level about ghost belief. But I did find one from 2018, and it said 58% of people are willing to consider the possibility of spirit manifestation / ghost presence, and 1 out of 5, so that's 20%, have actually seen or experienced a ghost firsthand. So just for our statistics, who feels like they're willing to, it's possible, like ghosts are possibly, yeah? Okay. And do we have anyone in the 20th percentile who actually has seen or experienced a ghost firsthand? All right. So you're probably like a 12% of this group. But, okay, keep your eyes open, because you guys have something tuned in. I'm definitely on the outskirts of that 58%. Like, I'll consider it, but I'm skeptical. I like my rational mind. That said, I do very much believe in something I call thin spaces. And my definition for what a thin space is when you are standing in a room or at the top of a stairwell or just in like a building, and you have a sensation that something is moving out of the corners of your eyes, yet you know better than to look. I don't know how you know, but you know if you look, there's nothing going to be there. But you just know that something is there, and you actually don't want to look and see what it is. So that to me is a thin space. It's a space where our reality and some other unexplainable reality is very close together. And we have a lot of those in the museum. One is in this barn. This is the 1917 dairy barn that was the original structure for the museum originally. I work on the bottom level most days making brooms. You may have seen me there if you've been here before. The first floor is very nice. It's cold on days like today, but there's no ghosts. It's all just cows. Cows are very sort of like docile. But as you go up to the second floor, you experience a palpable shift. There is a thin spot as you go through, and it sort of changes the way you feel. These security guards have reported hearing strange sounds. They've reported having their cell phone service drop out. Sometimes flashlights will fail. There is a small hearse, which is parked among the carriages on the upper building, kind of a little bit in. And right around there seems to be where most of that electric energy happens. It sort of drops things in and out. We also had an interpreter whose name was Paul. He kind of looked like Santa Claus. He worked mostly in the tavern and sometimes in Morehouse, way down in the village. And as guests were coming through, they would encounter him where he was supposed to be, way down there, and they would be shocked to see him. They'd be like, didn't we just see you on the second floor of the main barn? And so they were apparently for 3 or 4 years experiencing someone up there who looked a lot like Paul, who apparently was doing a good job of interpreting, like telling them useful information, and was dressed in period clothing, but was not Paul. And we had no one else who looked like Paul, and also we don't have anyone interpreting on the second floor, so people aren't up there. And Paul actually had to go so far as to start saying, "Oh yeah, that's my brother," so that people would just drop it. And eventually it stopped happening, but for 3 or 4 years, this was like this strange phenomenon of people encountering not Paul on the second floor. And then we had Joan. Joan would later go on to make brooms, but at this period of time, she was a ticket taker at the front. And as the museum just opened at 10 a.m., a mother and her son came into the museum, and Joan sent them upstairs while they waited for a third party to arrive. There's like tools and carriages and things upstairs. It's a nice place to be. I guess they're coming back. And then the two of them went upstairs, and one of them screamed. And so Joan rushed to the bottom of the stairs, hoping that someone had not hurt themselves. And the mother came down the stairs, holding her son in her arms, and said, "That man was very rude to my son." And Joan was like, "Who?" And the woman described a man dressed in historical clothing who yelled at her son to be quiet up there. And Joan, knowing that we didn't have anyone interpreting the second floor, knowing also at this time that no one was dressed in historical clothing, all of our interpreters were in polos and khakis at that point, apologized for this person, sent the mother and her son down into the village. She started going up the stairs, thought better of it, and she's a pretty commanding presence. So she just stood there in the middle of the stairs and said, "Hey you, don't do that again." And it never did it again. Yet. But Joan's not here anymore.
I do not know. So while I was making this video, there's a green light appearing on that building that you couldn't see, but you could see with this. Yeah. It's the wait,
Look this one, see if you see it.
Look.
Oh yeah, I see it.
What do you think that is?
What is that?
She gets what he was talking about.
Yeah, I heard
Paul.
it.
You know, we have a lot of Paul history, so.
Yeah, that was definitely.
If anybody's gonna bring out a Paul.
Alright, you keep your
That was
eye out for
probably
me.
this too. I'm just gonna keep my eye out for a TV, a flashing TV.
You think there's going to be a flashing TV on there?
Yeah. There's gonna be a woman that's gonna drop out.
It's like 5 degrees warmer. Gabby, are you warm enough?
It's warmer now.
Okay, do you need to put your pants on?
No, but it's warm. Ooh,
Yeah,
I
you
see
look
it again.
warm.
I see it again. It disappeared. It disappeared. Yeah, let's get closer. Yeah.
Mom, how long is this tour?
It appeared, Gabby. Gabby, it appeared again. It appeared again.
It's appearing again, the little green light. Don't get too far away from me. Come on.
Yeah,
I'm in the back. And that's my dad going to do.
Yeah, that green. Right here.
You saw it again?
Yep, I saw it again.
The green thing?
Yep. Yep, I just saw the green thing again.
Well, this is old historic building.
Oh no. Bro, this is gonna be worse.
So electric lights are behind us. Candlelight. As you go forward, the general store is not haunted, but it does allow us to talk about the commodification of all this. Does anyone know why we dress up for Halloween? Is this something that you?
Really fun.
So the spirits couldn't tell the difference.
Yes. It was like All Saints Day followed by All Souls Day. That was November 1st and 2nd. Derived probably from Celtic pagan tradition, but then eventually sort of adapted by the church. But All Souls Day in particular was the day that we put on these costumes so that they can't tell us from them. We blend in with the spirits who have all rose to walk the earth that day. I also did a deep dive on like the ghost costume, which just seems kind of lame, right? Like, that's not, if you're a kid, you don't want to dress up as a ghost, like, because it's just a bed sheet
Oh, I
with
see
the
the-
eyes
I
cut
see
out.
the
It's not
dot
very
again.
good.
I
But
see
what that
the
actually
dot
comes
again.
from
I see the
are
dot
burial
again.
shrouds. So the
The
dead
dot, it
bodies were wrapped
disappeared.
up in these white pieces of cloth, and sometimes they would put chalk and things in them so that they would keep the smell off before they were dropped into the ground. And so your early ghosts were essentially skeletons in burial shrouds. I don't think they had the eyes cut out, but I suppose that's just so we don't run into walls and things. But so, I don't know, maybe revisit the ghost costume. Make it a little decayed looking, it might be better that way. Then of course Disney gets a hold of it, like Casper the Friendly Ghost, and the whole thing gets out of control. But it sounds like actually it was a pretty gruesome costume in the early days. On the left here,
There's a dot.
speaking of unfriendly houses, this is Dimmick. We're not going in it. We don't have any specific stories. We just know that it doesn't like everybody. Joelle sometimes has gotten locked into several rooms in that house that do not have locks on them. She just can't get out for a while, and then it just lets her out. I go in there and I just feel like it resents me. I don't know why. It's just kind of grumpy.
Why is there a green dot? There's a green dot randomly appearing. There it is again. So you can't see. So you can't see that.
I can see that on your phone, but not now.
Oh yeah, I'm not clicking the go to spot. I don't know. Because why was that green dot appearing in my eyes? It's probably something. It's probably something. I bet it's something. But why was there a green dot appearing on it? Why was there a green dot appearing? Now I don't like this place. I think
Alright, this is the blacksmith shop. It was built in 1827 in New Berlin. They took it apart in a whole bunch of different pieces, numbered them, and brought it all back here and put it here. It had 3, 4, maybe even 5 owners if you want to be sort of nitpicky about it before it got to Arnold McCormick. Arnold's father owned it. He was the 3rd owner. And then he left it upon his death to Arnold and his sister, Arnold McCormick and his sister, and they fought over it for 10 years. Arnold wanted
the
it.
dot.
And after 10 years, they sold it to, the sister sold it to Arnold for $1. We don't really know why she sold it for so small of an amount, but that's what happened. And
There again.
then 2 years went by after Arnold had gotten the shop to himself. He got it in 1929, which is not a very good year in U.S. history. The Great Depression was starting. Blacksmithing was already falling off. There weren't a lot of people who were horseshoeing anymore, so it was kind of a dying tradition even then. So he got it in 1929, and 2 years later, he was dead. He, I guess, was a heavy drinker. Like, business had fallen off, and so he would spend his nights here drinking, and he would let the farmers kind of come and play cards. He would complain that they were costing him money, but it seemed like a sort of ambivalent experience. Like, so he didn't mind having the company, I don't think. In 1931, he had a mental breakdown. They took him to Binghamton Asylum. He got released, he came back, he was distraught for a couple of months, and then he took his own life. And you may have guessed already, but he did it here, in this building. Yeah. Probably right over here, is what I've been told specifically.
It disappeared.
Hanging,
Brain hemorrhage.
how do you get yourself?
Yeah. So, not a great way to go. And when the building was brought over to this particular location, it certainly seems plausible that Arnold came with it. So let's go through the various reasons why we believe that may be true. The first one is the tongs. These specific tongs are really good for nails. They have a head on them that is really good for holding the nail when you're hammering it. And so they put these balls on the tongs so that they could grab these out of all the different ones that they've got when they're going to do that particular implementation. These tongs mischievously disappear all the time. So you'll put them down and you'll go and you'll do something and you'll turn around and the tongs won't be there, and then you'll look around and then they'll be over here or they'll be somewhere else. They'll maybe appear a day later. Sometimes they're gone for a whole day. Somewhat more disturbingly, they are also sometimes reversed. So you're sticking this part, the head part, into the fire, the forge. It's like 1,000 degrees, so it gets really, really hot. And when you put it down in a very specific way so that you're going to then pick up the cold part, not the hot part. But as they put them down, they'll then reach for them and find them reversed, so that the hot part is now facing their hands. And these are professional blacksmiths. This is not something that they're just not good at doing. So we've had at least 3 or 4 incidences of that happening. They just kind of spin on people. And Joelle, who is also giving tours tonight, she's an opera singer, and she wholeheartedly believes in the ghosts. And she decided on one particular summer where these had been missing for like almost the entire summer, they hadn't been there for 3 months, that she was just going to talk to Arnold all afternoon long. And she sang to him, she talked to him, she told him stories, she yelled at him, and at the end of the day she says they were standing right there, as though they had been there the whole season. So that is the tongs. We also have a fairly frequent incidence of cleaning materials being messed with. Like the people who are going to wash the windows and things will come down, they'll have their paper towels, they'll put them somewhere, they'll start washing. They'll turn around, the towels are not there. They'll be like, ugh. They'll go back to the creamery, get more towels, they'll bring the towels back. The new towels are there, now the old towels are there, they've got way too many towels. So little things like that have been happening to people who are cleaning in here. We also have the pipe smoke incident, which is Nathaniel and Eric, 2 14-year-olds who were doing our young interpreter program for the blacksmithing. They were in here, and they thought they had set the place on fire because there was this really thick smell of smoke. But it was a specific kind of smoke. It was tobacco smoke. Smoking's not allowed on our campus, even though when they do the weddings, sometimes people just smoke anyway, and we don't stop them. But who wants to be that person, right? We have a picture of Arnold, though, and in this picture, he's on the far right, and he is holding and smoking a pipe. So they smelled this thick, heavy smoke. They freaked out because they couldn't figure out where it was coming from. They went out and got Ted, who was one of the senior interpreters, and as he was walking into the door, he said, well, it might be Arnold. And as soon as he said the word Arnold, the smoke smell was gone. Just vanished completely.
Arnold. What about alcohol?
What about alcohol?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is
The
alcohol?
smell of alcohol.
Oh, the smell of alcohol. I don't know of any recollections of that.
Because when you said he was a heavy drinker,
Yeah, you got
I
something?
got a really whiff,
Interesting. Like a whiff.
a very strong whiff of alcohol.
Very good. I'll add that to the annals.
Yeah, I smell smoke.
Paul, different Paul, not Santa
I smell
Claus
smoke
Paul,
too.
but blacksmith Paul. Probably about 15 years ago, was working late in this blacksmith shop. His wife worked at Bassett Hospital, and she worked until 7:30, and so they were sharing a car. He would work here until 7:30ish, and then go and pick her up, and they would go home together. So he was working in the shop when he heard the sound. It sounded like that from up there. Now, you can't actually get to the second floor without having to go out and up the hill, because the way this blacksmith shop was built originally, it was built on the side of a hill. So that instead of building stairs, they basically just put the second floor where it is, and you would just walk up the hill to get to it. So when they moved it here, they did the same thing. They slammed up against the cliff that was pre-existing, and so that's how you get there. So he had to go all the way outside to check this out, and go up to the hill, and go out to the back, and he found that the door was padlocked. He looked into the window, he saw no action, there was nothing moving. He is presumed, I don't know, could have been like a raccoon or something. He came back in, he started working again, and he heard the sound again, like that. And he looked up, And he says it could have been the trick of the light, but this trap door, which had previously been completely closed, was no longer fully closed. There was a little crack. And he saw something moving, and then he left. And after that, he spent 5 o'clock to 7:30 waiting in the Bassett Hospital parking lot for his wife to get done. He was no longer interested in working late. We also had the ghost hunters were here some years ago. They were not allowed to bring their cameras here, so they couldn't shoot a full show. Jane Clark, who's kind of the person who's in charge of this side of the museum, did not want it to be on record that we were a ghost haven. It's a family museum, and so they were told no, but they were going to do something at the Otasaga in January in Cooperstown. And if you're from here or from around here, you know that it gets dark at like 1 p.m. in January. You know, and there's nothing to do. So they had way too many people who signed up for the Otasaga Adventures, and so instead they decided they would reach back out to this museum to see if they could at least do tours, and they were granted the ability to do a tour at both the tavern and in the blacksmith shop for 3 nights. Apparently nothing much happened at the tavern, but in the blacksmith shop the second night, something did happen. They have these flashlights, so they'll undo the flashlight so that the filament is kind of flickery, so that like electromagnetic energy can act upon it in a different way. And essentially, if the flashlight turns on, it means yes, and if it turns off, it means no. And on this second of the 3 nights that they were doing it, they had the flashlight down there, and they asked, "Is anyone here?" And the flashlight turned on. And one of the blacksmiths, of our blacksmiths who was in attendance, was like, "Is it Arnie?" And then the blacksmith, or the light turned off. And so then the person who was actually doing the formal questioning asked more formally, "Are you Arnold McCormick?" And the light turned back on again. So I guess he doesn't like to be called Arnie, right? They then asked, "Are you a blacksmith?" Which seems like an obvious question, but the light remained on, so yes. And then they asked, "Are you alone?" And the light turned off. No. So that's interesting. We don't know who else might be around, but we do know this. When Patrick, another one of our people who does these ghost tours here and there, was doing this tour about 4 years ago, there were 2 younger women standing near the door as he was giving the sort of tour, and they started becoming hysterical, and he kind of just sort of powered through and finished. And then as he was leaving, the mother of the daughters apologized, but also told him that they had seen someone standing directly behind him, like right here, watching him, and holding a golden pocket watch as though he was going on much too long. And they were just waiting for him to leave. So Joel's theory on this is that Arnold would have probably pawned all of his valuables at a certain point, so he probably wouldn't have had a gold pocket watch. So there's at least a arguable theory that that could have been the second party or in the shop, just waiting for Patrick to finish up. We also have a recollection from Jackie. Jackie is one of our, and she's not an interpreter, she doesn't like work for the museum, but she was doing a historical enactment one weekend, and she heard the sound of the hammer after hours. The hammer is something that sounds like that. Like, and when you work here, you just kind of get used to it. It's like very ambient sound, because they're always banging on something over here. But on that night, it was like 5:30 or so, she heard the hammer, and she came to the window to see what was happening, see who was working on what, and a hand slammed up against the window, and she screamed. And she said she saw the glimpse of a male face, and it was not one of the blacksmiths who worked here. She'd never seen this face before. And when our employees were told about it, we showed her the picture of Arnold. And she looked at it, and she nodded, and she said, yes, that was him. When they do those ghost hunter tours, they ask a question also like near the end, which is essentially, I might be paraphrasing it a little bit, but essentially it's like, are you happy where you are, and would you like to leave? Or are you able to leave? And when they asked that question, the flashlight just flickered for a while and then went out and wouldn't go back on again. So ambivalent, hard to say. Luckily, we can come and go as we please. All right, so it's the reverse of before. A little bit of a step up.
I saw it again. I'm seeing a green dot. Why is there a green dot?
Do you see anything?
Yeah, there's a green dot on the camera.
Yeah?
I got a phone.
But there's no green dot
On the
on
camera.
anywhere
Yeah.
else.
Well, pixels are weird.
Jack, it might just be the flare
Because
from
he's not walking this
Definitely.
way. And they
This is
and
a
I
red
saw
flare.
like I saw
Yeah,
some
this is
way
light flare.
in it.
And then
So I
like,
thought that
right
was
there,
Arnold or someone.
green.
I think Arnold was in the picture.
Yes, because we
tonight
kept
I am.
seeing like
Yeah, I saw it.
some wavy stuff and a green dot.
All right, just put that on the ground so you don't find anything.
Yeah, and it looked like there was smoke in the camera.
Exactly.
It looked like there was
You
smoke in the
said
camera.
that there's a smell of smoke,
Yeah,
didn't you?
yeah, I smelled
So
smoke.
that will mean that we saw something windy on the camera, but not in person. We saw a green dot and we smelled smoke.
Yeah, I was.
So that
smelling-
could be either Arnold or the other one that
Yeah, once they
died.
said they,
That must be
people
one of the
smelled
people that
smoke.
died.
I smelled some smoke after they said that people smelled smoke. I said, then I smelled smoke.
Maybe it's one of the ghosts.
I don't know.
I don't want to.
Smoke right after they said that.
After
yeah.
they said we
I
saw
was
something.
smelling smoke, and it was like it looked like there was smoke in the camera.
No, I
Yeah,
did. There was
but-
one point it looked like it was kind of a little spooky, like there was an aura
We
around the
saw a
green
tiny-
dot.
Yeah, it
We
looked
saw
like
a
there was
tiny-
smoke.
Jack, can I talk to Tata? Tata, if it was a giza,
Is Dr. Thrall's pharmacy.
Yeah, I saw it.
This was built in the 1840s and it was in Hardwick, New York. And as you may guess, Dr. Thrall was the pharmacist.
and then after they said smoke, Jack
And
smelled
in
it.
1848, he posted a notice in the paper
Lessons.
advertising for what he described as an anatomical theater. And so what that
That
is
light.
if you see the second floor where the lights are, there's a whole second level up there where you can actually stand up. It doesn't look very tall from here. It seems like it'd be like almost a tall space. There's a whole second level, a little bit cramped, but you can stand up. And as the sun went down and into candlelight, presumably his idea was that he was going to acquire
What's
dead
happening?
bodies, and they were going to be dissected in front of medical students for like a demonstration after hours.
Why is there blue?
He went so
dots
far
all
as
over
to
the
advertise how
screen?
much it cost. It cost $1 per head. And also he found lodging for them. They were going to stay nearby in Hardwick.
I'm saying it's
We don't know if he ever did.
ghosts.
It seems possibly not likely that he pulled it off because Hardwick was a very religious community at that time, and it doesn't seem like the kind of activity they would have really wanted in their little township. But we do know that he must have acquired the body or had a plan to acquire the body illegally, or else he wouldn't have put it in the paper. That said, there was quite a bit of illegal activity along those lines, and so for that, we're going to go into the grave.
The where?
A graveyard?
The graveyard?
Seriously?
No! That's a big graveyard! Oh, that's up over.
Okay, this is gonna be bad.
Really bad? Like bad, like what? Like scary?
Now I'm getting even colder though. I was fine over there.
Do you want to put your pants on?
Nope.
You can slip them right on over your
I'm
shorts.
cold over here. Yeah, I was fine around there.
Gather along here if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm super cold. Why do we have to go in the graveyard? I'm going in. I'm going in. I want to see a clown.
Clown?
I want to see a clown.
Clown? There's a clown in there?
I'm only coming in here because I want to see it all.
Unless they're underground somewhere. So yeah, they called it body snatching. They also called them resurrection men during this time period. Yeah, they were the ones who would come into the graveyard late at night and they would acquire bodies illegally for medical purposes. Generally, they could get pretty good money for it, and so it became almost like a cottage industry. At this time period, the only way you could get your hands on a body legally was if it was a criminal who had been executed by the state. You could get that for like medical purposes. Occasionally, you could get like an unclaimed body from a medical asylum or something like that, or from an insane asylum. But generally speaking, the pickings were thin on the legal side of things, and so as always is the case, the criminals made up the
I'm
rest.
getting cold.
And it became such a big problem that there were all these editorials written. They started taking extreme measures to stop these people. So here's how they did it. They would send what they called a designated mourner. This was a person who would come during the daytime, usually a woman, and they would mark the grave. They would figure out which was the grave that had just been, like, the buried body was in. And then they would come in the darkness of night, and they would dig a small hole. Now, it doesn't take, you don't have to dig the whole body out. See how small this hole is right here? You only have to do like a 2 or 3 foot by 3 foot hole. and then you use the shovel that you dug that hole with, or a pike, to break through the top of the coffin, and then you use a hook on a rope. So you attach this to a rope and you drop the hook down that hole, and you drop it all the way down into where the body is. You hook the body and then you pull it up like you're ice fishing, like that. And if the body is fresh enough, it doesn't fall apart when you do that. And then you've got your specimen, and the medical students get to study, and everyone is happy except for the family of the body, I guess. This became such a big problem that if you were of the means to do so, you could hire a grave sitter. So this was like a gig economy thing from the 1800s, where for 7 to 10 days you would just sit out here in the dark with your little candle, making sure that no one was going to rob the grave. And there's your burial shroud too, right there.
Are any of these real?
There's no bodies buried. The stones are real. They were donated after being in storage for a while from a plot that had all of its stones replaced with newer stones, and so they were no longer being used.
There's no reason to be scared. There's no spirit.
I want to see the body. It says Cole. I can't read the rest. Hey guys. Yeah, I couldn't read the name, but I think it said like
Here,
it said in the beginning. It said
on these steps,
CHOLFE.
that Mary, who was one of our museum teachers. The museum teachers are people who work both sides. They work on the Fenimore and the History Museum. They're generally here on site when we have big school groups, and this was the case on this particular instance. She was standing here. She had a group of about 40 kids. They had just been in the tavern. She was bringing them over to the church. She looked up, and if you see that window on the second floor with the lights in it, with candlelight, third one from the back, she looked through that window, and she saw the face of a girl. And what she thought initially was, oh, I missed one, because she had this group, and she thought the girl had gotten separated. And so she had to go back to the tavern to get this particular girl, who was also being in that window, is in a space that is not publicly available in the museum. That's like a storage space, and sometimes we use it for weddings. So this girl was going to be in trouble, obviously. So she went up, she went in, she went up the second floor, she went into the room, she opened the door, and she saw looking out the window a little girl wearing an old-fashioned yellow dress. And she said the girl turned to look at her, and as she did, the girl just vanished. And Mary did not tell anyone about this for at least 3 weeks. She did not want people to think she was losing her mind. Luckily for her, when she did tell people, it turned out there have been other incidences of this particular girl. This girl has actually even shown up in a photograph once or twice. And so to talk about the rest, we'll go into it.
No, I don't believe in ghosts because he said it was true, and I didn't believe it until I
They were
saw
sightings.
until I thought I saw like
Have you ever had
someone
a
in
sighting?
the cemetery that
Or
we
just the green
passed
dot?
and green
Remember
dot.
when the walls were, when I said the walls were closing in on me?
When was that? In your room?
Yes.
No, you're right.
Remember that?
I do remember that.
Yeah.
And your lights flickered? Alright. So you raised your hand when you said they had a sighting.
I didn't post it. Okay, I'm saying I really hope I have a sighting.
You what?
I really hope I see one.
You want to see one, I think.
Yes, I really want to see. And I would. I'd love it if I could get it on camera.
Here we are, Bone Tavern. Built in 1795, one of our oldest buildings. And also just worth spending a minute imagining that this is what it was like in the nighttime. Like, the fire would be lighting more than what we have lit now, the light of the fire. But outside of your lanterns and your candlelight, that was it. So this is, after the sun went down, this is how it looked. Which we just don't really experience. We've given ourselves a lot more light to work with. modern times. Anyway, it was pretty much where you guys are sitting now that Kitty was sitting. I like to sit in this chair too, actually. This is the chair in this particular building that you can sit and you can see people coming in through the front door, and they can also see you at the same time, which is kind of key, because otherwise they think you're like fake or something. Like they freak out. And I don't want people to like jump, so like I try to be in a place where they can see me and I can see them. And some days it gets really, really slow and you're sitting in the chair and you're thinking about whatever, like maybe, like, remember the All Souls Day where like we dress up like them, like you might be wondering, what happens if they all dress up like us? How are we gonna know? Like I could just be visited by ghosts all day long. But, so Kitty was sitting there. Kitty, unlike me, does not believe in ghosts at all. She's really a hard no on the ghosts. And she heard from downstairs a girl's voice saying, "Mama." There are bathrooms downstairs. There's a women's and a men's. There's the public space for this area. And so she heard a girl saying, "Mama, Mama, Mama." Not like really worried or like alarmed, but just repetitive. And she began to wonder if someone had gotten separated from their family. And so she went down the stairs and she found that there was nobody there. Again, this is a slow day, so there weren't a lot of people around in the first place. And she thought that they must have, figured it out. So she went back up the stairs and she came back to sit down, and then she heard from the second floor the same voice saying, "Mama, Mama, Mama." And she went up the stairs and there was nobody upstairs. And she went out to the porch and she saw nobody in the whole green. So there was nobody in the vicinity. And she was troubled by this, I think, clearly. And she went back and sat down, and that was the end of that particular event, although we'll pick it up a little bit later. We'll jump now, though, to some security guard depictions. The security guards have the gold, right? They're the ones who are here late at night. They come when no one else is around in the middle of the night. They have to be here every 4 or 6 hours to check the buildings, because these are, this is a museum, and this is essentially the collection of the museum, or these houses. They're quite valuable. And so we have security, so they check up on them. They even have like security cards that they have to swipe at certain places to demonstrate where they've been so that they can be tracked. One of the security guards, his name was Ben. He was here late one night. He went up to the second floor and was checking all the rooms. He was checking the room that we looked at the window of earlier from the church. And there are some mirrors in that room, because we will occasionally use that for like prepping for the wedding groups that we'll rent out. And he saw in the mirror the little girl in the yellow dress. He saw her just sitting in the corner. And then he looked to the corner, and there was nobody there. Completely empty little corner of a room. He looked back at the mirror, and the girl turned to look at him. And he says the next thing he remembers, he was in the middle of the green. He doesn't remember his feet even touching the stairs on his way down. And by all accounts, he was a rather large man, so quite the move for him. And then he quit. Like, he did. He would not work here if he had to go in the tavern anymore, so he legitimately just quit. Another security guard, whose name was Sean, was standing more or less where I'm standing now, looking out that window, when he saw, leaning up against the pole there, a man dressed in historical clothing, smoking a pipe. And he said he could see him so vividly that you could see that he needed a shade, like he had a 5 o'clock shadow. And his hair stood up on end. Sean's, not that guy's. And he knew that this was not good. It'd be a really wild prank. And so he went out the door on the side, and he went around to the front, and there was nobody there, but you could still smell that sort of pipe smoke smell just hanging there in the air. But unlike Ben, Sean was thrilled. He loved it. This was awesome. This is why he signed up for this job in the first place. So he made a field recording. He put a tape recorder on this table on his next shift, and he hit record, and he made all the sounds that we make when you're leaving the room. Made a big show of it so you could hear that. And then he came back 4 hours later to collect the recording, and eventually he played it back for some of our other interpreters at that time. And here's what you can hear in the recording. For the first, after you hear him leave, there's a period of silence where there's nothing. It's just like the room tone. And then all the chairs are pulled away from the tables. You can hear that sound of like the scraping of the chairs. And then there's another long period of silence, long enough that it tricks you kind of into thinking nothing else is going to happen at all. And then it's a little bit up to sort of interpretation. I think you could argue one way or the other, but what definitely sounds to me is what happens near the end of the recording is that someone gets quite close to the recorder and says like, right into it. Yeah. There was an exorcism. It it wasn't even of the tavern, or it happened here, but it wasn't for here. So we had another house. It was the Seneca Bark House, like a long house that was up on the hill there. It used to be there until they moved it across the way down by the water. And when I first poked my head into this particular building, it was like my first or second month of working here. I was not aware we even did ghost tours. And so I wasn't like trying to gather data or anything. But I definitely got, it was a bad place. Like you felt that sort of like sink when you stuck your head in it. And I did not care to go any farther in. And so super haunted, yeah, like 28 deaths were affiliated with that particular house, of which only 3 were from natural causes. It was so bad that the Seneca Nation did not want it. They donated it to the museum in part to just get rid of it. And so there it was up on the hill, and Dave was the manager at the time, and he did not want to deal with the ghosts anymore. Even, like, apparently, it would also sort of rain snakes every once in a while, which is a thing that can happen scientifically. Like, the snakes live in the house, and something happens, they'll drop. But, like, still, not a good look. And so he decided he was going to hire 2 Native American elders to do an exorcism. And so he hired them, he got the money, he got a grant to do this. And they came, but on the night that they came, it was pouring rain. And so they couldn't really safely get up the hill to where the house was located. And so instead, the elders were like, it's fine, we can do it from here. We'll do it from the tavern, it'll be nice and dry. We'll be able to look straight at it. We'll go up to the second floor and do it from the porch. And so they did the exorcism from there. And the people who were in the building at that time to witness this said near the end, at the end of the whole ritual, there was like sort of like a pressure change. It's not like the doors like blew open or slammed shut, but they like pulsed at the end of this exorcism, and then the rain stopped. And in the next morning, Jill, who was another one of our interpreters who often interprets the tavern, she came in. She did not know that the exorcism had happened. She was unaware of this. She also super loves the ghosts. Like, she says that she can feel the little girl's hand with her hand when they're going to open the porch in the morning. She says hello to them. They're like the friends of hers. And so she came in and she was super devastated. She was like, where are my friends? My friends are gone. And she started telling people about this and eventually learned that there had been this exorcism. And so what seems to have happened is it cleared out the tavern for a time. It did nothing to the house up there. That was still super haunted, snakes and all. And then about 2 weeks later, Jill was working again, and she's like, my friends are back! But she also said, except for that one, he doesn't belong here. And what she was indicating was the second floor, there's a room in the back, a little single bedroom, which we call the peddler's room. And someone was there that had not been there previous. And I will vouch for this. I have been up there, again, previous to when I knew there were ghost tours, so I wasn't even tuned into this. I wasn't in the mindset. That particular room, when you look into it, for me, it feels like the way that you feel when you're about to drop from a roller coaster, like that stomach drop feel. Like, it's like very strange, and I keep trying to test it. I keep being like, it can't keep doing that, right? But it kind of always does. Like, it always gives me this weird little drop feeling when I look into it. And Deb, who checked you in today for the ticketing, has said that she actually felt that she had like a hand put on her as she was walking by, like someone pushed her against the wall. We've had security guards say that they hear like a male voice saying, get out from that room. And so Joel's theory there is that perhaps one of the ghosts from up yonder in the log house got displaced and just took up residence here. So if you're ever here during the daytime, go check out that room. We're not going to look at it tonight, but it's worth a shot. It's very strange. Again, no one has ever been harmed. Most of the inhabitants here seem pretty benevolent, but that one seems at least a bit angry. All right, let's go into the kitchen.
The kitchen is good.
Alright, so we're going to go back to Sean for this last story in the tavern. We close at the end of October, but the museum remains. It's here. It's just not open to the public. So this was like in the middle of the winter. There was heavy snow. It was in the middle of the night, middle of the winter with the snow on the ground. And when Sean was in the lower building, in the room that we're in now, in the kitchen, he heard some steps from upstairs. And so he called across to the Fenimore side to report that he thought we had an intruder, which was plausible. Strangely enough, we don't have as much vandalism as you would think. Like, I would think if I was like a high school student in Cooperstown, I'd definitely be like, this is where we're going in the middle of the night. But don't do it. They've got cameras and things. You'll probably get put in jail. Anyway, apparently it doesn't happen as much as I think it should happen. But this was what Sean thought. He thought that someone had broken in and was upstairs. And so it was snowing heavily enough that the people on the Fenimore side were going to have to get into a car. It was going to take them a little while to get here. So they're like, just hang tight. We'll be there when we can. And so he sat down in this chair where the candle is. And he waited because he figured he would be able to see whoever this was coming down one way or the other. And so the steps kind of kept going back and forth and back and forth. And then they got to the back. And then he heard them coming down the stairs, and unlike how we talked about earlier, he made the mistake of looking, and there was nothing there. But the steps were still there. He could hear the sound of the steps creaking down, and then he heard them go right by him, and he heard the door open, even though the door didn't open, and then they went out the door. And so he opened the door, and all he could see was his own footsteps leading up to it. Well, let's walk that path. Stay to your right, kind of more or less, right in the middle. There's a sort of a drop off. You have to go pretty far to the left to be in danger, but just don't go to the left at all, and you'll be fine. After it's like there's some stone drop.
Do not step on stone. Don't step on those big stones we dropped. They should put something around them.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, Dad. Could you stay with me?
Mm-hmm. Those are ghosts.
Dad, can I go back on your street? Yeah, the camera's kind of bad here. The camera's kind of bad here.
Kind of what?
Bad here, see? It's night. It works perfectly at night. At our house. Now there's 2 green dots. There was 2 green dots.
The Moore house, they liked their wallpaper. They were relatively wealthy, and wallpaper used to be a sign of wealth. And there's nothing.
That's what they used to tax for those closets.
No, it's on the ghost side of things. Although the rocking chair in the corner has some strange history. There were. You're about to sit in it?
Yeah, she was watching.
There were 2 girls who were twins, and one of them sat in the chair, and the other one freaked out. She's like, "It's a bad chair! It's a bad chair! It's a bad chair!"
Well, I'm moving.
Yeah. And occasionally we'll have that with like siblings, especially if they sit in the chair, they'll have these different experiences with the chair. But we'll look at that later. For now, we're going to go. Oh, you should try it on the way out.
Twins here. Why don't you try to sit? Don't
We're gonna
you
do
don't
it
have to
here.
now.
Can I sit in the chair?
No.
You can sit on these benches. We have benches you can sit on here.
I want to sit in.
It's a guy.
Where's there a zombie?
Is that a zombie?
Where's the dude?
True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I have been enamored. Why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was a sense of hearing acute. I had all things in the heavens and in the earth. I have many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. An object, there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold, I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so, very gradually, by degrees, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad, but madmen know nothing. You should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, just at midnight, I turned the latch of the old man's door and opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I first put in a dark lantern, closed, all closed so that no light shone out. And then I thrust my head in. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so as not to disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see the old man as he lay upon his bed. Would a madman have been so wise as this? Then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed. And so you see, it was impossible for me to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into his chamber and spoke courageously to him, addressing him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. And so you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine own. Never before that night had I felt the true extent of my own power. To think, there I was opening the door little by little, and the old man not even to dream of my secret thoughts or deeds. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved in the bed suddenly as if sort. Now, you may think that I drew back, but no. No, the room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were all closed fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew he could not see the opening of the door. So I kept pushing it, steadily. I had my head in, and I was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I remained quite still and said nothing. For another hour I did not move a muscle. And in the meantime, I did not hear the old man lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the walls. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain, for Eve knows the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night just at midnight, while all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening the dreadful echo, the terrors that distracted me. I say, I knew the sound well. I knew what the old man felt, and I pitied him. Although I chuckled at heart. I knew he'd been lying awake ever since that first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had ever since been growing upon him. Oh, he had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is only the wind in the chimney. It is but a mouse crossing the floor. It is merely a cricket that has made a single chirp." Yes, he'd been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but had found all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching the old man, had stopped with his black shadow before him, and that shadow had now reached and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of that unperceived shadow that caused the old man to feel, though he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. Now, after I had waited a long time very patiently without hearing the old man lie down, I resolved to open a very little crevice in the lantern, and so I opened it, stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice in the lantern and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open! Wide open! I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue with a hideous veil over it chilled the very marrow of my bones, but I could see nothing else of the old man's face nor person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. Now, have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over acuteness of the senses? I say to you now, there came to my ear a low, dull, quick sound, much as the sound a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart, and it increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier into courage, and yet I refrained and kept still. I held the lantern motionless. I tried as steadily as I could to maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. Go quicker and quicker and louder every moment. The old man's terror must have been extreme. Go louder, I say, louder every instant. You mock me. Well, I have told you that I am nervous, and so I am. And now, in that dead hour of the night, in the dreadful silence of that old house, such a strange sound as this excited me to uncontrollable wrath, and yet I refrained and kept still. But the heart beat on, going louder and louder and louder and louder. I thought the heart must burst, and then a new anxiety seized me. The noise, it would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leapt into the room. The old man shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled a heavy bed on top of him. I then sat upon the bed, smiled gaily to see the work so far done. The heart beat on with a muffled sound for many minutes. This, however, did not vex me. I knew it would not be heard through the walls. At length, it ceased. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. The old man was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there for many minutes. There was no pulsation. The old man was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. Now, if you still think me mad, you shall think so no longer. Once I described to you the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head, and the arms, and the legs, and then pulled up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited it all between the scantlings. I then replaced the board so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I had been too clever for that. The tub had caught all. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still black as midnight. And as the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 gentlemen who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor in the night, and a suspicion of foul play had been aroused. A complaint had been lodged, and they, the officers, had been dispatched to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome, welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all through the house and bid them search. Search well. I led them at length to his chambers, and I showed them his treasures secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to sit and rest from their fatigues. While in the wild audacity of my own perfect triumph, I placed my own seat precisely upon the spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered them cheerily, they chatted of familiar things, but ere long I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. Still the men sat, still they chatted. The ringing grew more distinct. I spoke more freely to rid myself of the feeling, but the sound continued and gained definitiveness until at length I found that the sound was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale. I spoke more quickly, but the noise steadily increased. What could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much as the sound a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I spoke more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose, and I argued about trifles in a high key, and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore, I swung the chair from which I sat, and grated it upon the boards. The noise arose above all and continually increased. It grew louder and louder and louder and louder, and still the men sat pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible that they heard not? No, they heard. They suspected. They knew! They were making a mockery of my horror. Oh, this I thought, and this I did, but anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I felt I could stand their hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt them scream or die hard. Again, louder, 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 louder. Villains, I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here. It is the beating of his hideous heart.
Bravo. Bravo, good sir.
Right through here, back out the door.
Wow.
I'm gonna sit.
Dude, it's fantastic.
You gonna say that? Okay, give it a shot.
Watch out.
What?
What do you think?
Good, bad,
Sad.
neutral?
Oh, come on. Did you feel anything?
No.
Did Gabby feel anything?
No.
Did she tell you to get out? She just walked out the door.
She just walked out.
Did you see any green dots in there?
Yeah, we don't know who that guy is.
You did.
No, I'm joking.
She's like, we don't know who that guy is.
I'm just like, you. They set that up. They set that up.
I really liked it. Yeah, I need to do a picture. Nothing happened. Picture. It's a good show. Ew, 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 it's muddy. Ew.
I feel like there's a certain age where like ghost stories really sink into certain, you know what I mean? That's why we have like the RL signs and all these things like that. For me, there was a particular old book that my parents had that was like an old ghost book called Ghosts and More Ghosts. And there was a story in it called Do You Believe in Ghosts? Which was about a radio broadcaster. The whole thing was written in like the 1940s. So like an older radio ghost story.
That was way
With
before I was
broadcast.
born.
And kind of like, I'll definitely paraphrase it because it's been a long time since I've done this edit in the original. But the story, very briefly, was about a radio host of a celebrity who did not believe in ghosts.
Guys, I can't use this.
Created like a stunt broadcast from a haunted house. And they approached the house. It was like the perfect haunted house, dark woods and the swamp. Just disgusting. A bad house. They came up with the ghost itself. It was this slug that was like crossed with a dead man kind of thing. So it's a swamp ghost thing that they created. And they came up with a plan where he would be handcuffed to the bed by himself on the second floor, and his radio broadcast team would not be there. They would be remote, and he would be the only person in the house. So just kind of your classic haunted house setup. And so they did all of these things. He went on the air. The broadcast began, and he began to do the broadcast for the people listening. He described the house. He described all the sounds. He described the swampy smell that you could smell from beyond. And he started describing sounds that were coming from the swamp, and like the sound of a door opening, something was scratching against the door on the first floor. And as he was telling the story, he kind of felt all of these hundreds of thousands of people who were tuned into this broadcast start to buy into it. He felt like the wave of their belief, I guess, sort of just wash over him. And that invigorated him, and he did even better. Like, he described the ghost as the ghost was coming up the stairs, and he had some holy water and a crucifix, and as it busted on him, he like threw the holy water at it, and it hit, and he held up the crucifix, and it went down the stairs into the swamp. And he wrapped up the story, and he got off the air. And then he called his production team, and he asked them if they could hurry back. Because he's like, I am actually hearing some things from the swamp, and so let's just get some people here as soon as we can, no biggie, so like, bring them back please. And then he got back on the radio again a few minutes later and asked if he could go back on the air. He wanted to tell the people that what had happened was not true. They had made it all up. It was a complete fiction. That everything he had told them was false. And they couldn't put him back on the air. There's no way to put you back on the air once you're off. And so the production team tried to race to the house, and when they got there, of course, all that was left of the broadcaster was just one of the handcuffs hanging from the bed with some swamp ooze on the ground. And outside of kind of a neat setup, what I liked about that story the most, I think, was the idea that a collective belief could actually bring something into being, could manifest something. That's really stayed with me. And it's one of those things I think is really interesting. And so I only asked the question about these ghost tours that we're doing here. We're giving them 6 hours of airtime every night for the next 2 more weekends. And so I just wonder how we're contributing to their sort of life source by doing so.
signs that can't be in that area, the first or the fourth sign.